Good morning everyone and welcome to the video. It is a beautiful day here in London. Just finished up a 19-kilometer run, 517 kilometers pace, 141 beats per minute. Heart rate, as you can see, is nice and low, 141 beats per minute. Now in this video I'm going to be explaining exactly why that is important and why you want to be keeping a low heart rate, why that's important for long distance, short distance, what role that plays in your training. So whether you're training for an ultra, whether it's a 10k, half marathon, marathon, you're going to need to incorporate some kind of zone 2 training into your workouts. I'm just starting to get the hang of kilometers and kilometer paces, because usually I run in miles, but for this world record that we're trying to break, it's in kilometers, and the treadmill is going to be in kilometers as well, so might as well get used to kilometers and kilometer paces. Again, I said this in the last video, I'm training outside now, as you can see, just because I'm trying to make the most out of this gorgeous weather while we're here in London, because once we go back to Dubai, I'm going to be locked inside the dungeon doing lots and lots of treadmill running. It is going to be hours upon hours on the treadmill. Going to be pretty boring. Hopefully we're going to get more mentally tough, but for now we're just doing some base training. Going to get back to the house now, get recovered, and then I'll be explaining a little bit more about zone 2 and how you can stay in a zone 2 zone, why that's important and what that's going to do for your training. Whack the mic over here. Okay, so zone 2 training. What is it all about? Why is it all important? Now, for every single training block that you're going to be doing, whether that's an ultra, whether that's a marathon, half marathon, 10k, whatever it happens to be, you're going to need to involve some kind of zone 2 training. Now, first I'm going to be explaining why it's important, and secondly I'm going to be explaining what you can do to improve your zone 2. Now, if you can imagine your fitness like on a scale, let's say this is your fitness, okay? Fitness, excuse my writing, that's a 0, this is a 10. So you want to get as much fitness as possible. And if we think of our fitness in like triangles or pyramids, if you're going to build a pyramid and you don't have a very good zone 2 base, your pyramid's not going to get very big. What you want to have, you want this big zone 2, that zone 2 base to build your pyramid on, so you can get the most amount of fitness you can. And then on top of this, you're going to be doing your speed workouts, you're going to be doing your lactate threshold workouts, you're going to have mile repeats in here, like you're going to be doing your faster efforts on here. That's what the actual fitness is, but without this big base, you're not going to be able to do that, okay? So that's what zone 2 is. Zone 2 is the base building blocks. It's not everything, but it's the base building blocks of all of your fitness. I'm just doing like a bunch of these kind of, like these zone 2 base builders. I'm doing a bunch of those because obviously I'm training for something very long. I'm training for 7 days running on a treadmill. So that's going to be mostly at a zone 2 or a zone 1. I'm not going to be in zone 3 very often. Like the goal is to be in zone 2 so I can burn the least amount of fuel possible. So I'm going to be trying to stay in zone 2 as often as I can. Now, the easiest way to work out what your zone 2 is, okay, and this is just a rough guide, by the way. If you're just starting out or you've been running like 1 or 2 years, this is for you. There are more accurate ways to figure it out, and you can do that in a blood test, you can do that with a VO2 max test, it happens in a lab. Those are a little bit more expensive. That's what I'm going to be doing in like a couple of weeks with Embody. But right now, this is just like a guide for you to get started. So how do you work out what your zone 2 is? To get started, you do 180 and you minus your age. That is going to give you your max aerobic heart rate, okay? Your max aerobic heart rate, not your maximum heart rate, your maximum aerobic heart rate. For example, 180 minus my age, I'm 32, so my max aerobic heart rate is 148 beats per minute. Now, I share some of the stats from my runs, and what you'll see is my heart rate doesn't ever go over this number here. Doesn't ever go over 148. Always stays below that number. So when I go out for my runs now, I'm wearing a heart rate monitor. You can use your watch, but that's typically not advisable. It's not that accurate from your watch. I would recommend using a heart rate monitor. And that's going to tell you how fast your heart is beating on these runs, okay? So 148 beats per minute. So for you, whatever that number is, you want to be keeping that nice and steady. So why do we do that? When you're keeping your heart rate low and you're staying in your aerobic zone, what that's doing is it's teaching your body how to use oxygen, okay? So aerobic means with oxygen. So you're teaching your body how to use the oxygen and how to sustain that effort for as long as possible. Now, when you start off, you're probably not going to be able to run that fast, okay? Because if you're like me, when you were starting off, I used to do all my runs fast. I didn't know about these zones. I didn't know about anything like that. So what I was doing is I was running everything way too quick. You need to slow it down. So you're probably going to get surprised when you first put the heart rate monitor on and you're aware of what your aerobic zone should be. You're going to be running a lot slower than you thought, okay? And usually, if I was doing like a marathon or like maybe like a 50 miler, I would make sure this training is at least 70 to 80% of my training. So a lot of the training will be at this pace, like a slow pace. So at the minute for me, that pace is anywhere between an 8 and a 9 minute mile, or that works out to be around 5 to 5:40 minute kilometer. That's what mine tends to be right now. So where usually I'd be adding speed workouts with the extra 20 to 30%, right now I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to get as much miles as possible. Now, as I said, when you first start off, you're going to be very frustrated because usually, let's say you're running at a 5 minute per kilometer pace and you think you're in aerobic zone and really you're not. Once you start putting that heart rate monitor on, you're going to see at that pace, your heart rate might be 160 or 165, okay? You're going to have to slow right the way down to get into your aerobic zone of like 145, 148, whatever it happens to be, depending on how old you are. So you're going to have to slow right down to maybe a 6 minute pace. You might even have to walk. I mean, it might be damaging to your ego, but you might have to even walk, like do like a fast walk, just to make sure that you're in that aerobic zone. And then what you're going to notice is you're going to be really pissed off for the first few weeks. You're going to be thinking, this ain't doing anything. I'm not even running. I'm not even trying hard. But listen, you just need to trust the process. It's all about teaching your body to be more efficient. It's taking that oxygen and it's learning how to use that. All of my runs, if not 95% of my runs, are at zone 2. It's all about the base building. I need that big, solid foundation to be, because if I'm gonna run for a week, okay, for 20 hours a day, I'm gonna need that big foundation. That foundation needs to be as strong as possible because I'm gonna be all day in that zone 2 and I need to be able to use the oxygen and my fuel as efficiently as possible. And the bigger that base is, the more efficient that base is, the longer and the faster I'm going to be able to run. So that's the plan. That's zone 2. That's why it's important. Another way to know if you're in a zone 2, if you don't have a heart rate monitor, is is, can you hold a conversation? Are you able to talk in full sentences? If you're able to talk in full sentences like this while you're speaking, while you're running, then that's gonna mean that you're in a zone 2, isn't it? So if you haven't got a heart rate monitor, that's usually a good way to tell. You should be able to be breathing comfortably through your nose throughout the whole run. And yeah, it should feel like an effort you can sustain for an hour, 2 hours, for a longer amount of time. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Mwah.
So aside from Everybodies, my background is fashion. So I've got a bunch of different fashion companies, and my main one right now that I'm focusing on is called Mallet London. Been going for about 10 years and got some meetings up in the West End. I've also got a meeting with a distributor for Everybodies, so that's going to be exciting. So I'm going to handle those and then get some food with the family. I'm going to go meet up with my wife and the boys, and we're going to go to a place called Goodman's, which is one of our favourite restaurants in Mayfair. We're going to get ourselves some lovely steaks and probably call it a day. It's been a productive one. Let's go get something to eat. Come and stop for lunch. We're in Goodman's in Mayfair. Tremendous steaks, best steaks in London. So I'm gonna eat steak.
I need steak and rice.
They ain't got rice here. I've ordered chips. Is that right?
Steak and rice. Chips.
So we've ordered 2 400-gram fillets. We've got chips coming, we've got onions coming, we've got mushrooms coming, we've got a salad coming. I'm starving.